money, 2 for the money, 3 for the money, 4 for the people who are dying.
We're sending the babies
and we're dropping like flies. Yes, we're dropping like flies. You can call it prosperity, call it what you like. Say the numbers make the death tolls look too high. 2 things that never change, even if you try. Your shit still stinks and the numbers don't lie. Dance to the war, dance to the war, to the dance, to the war, dance to the war, to the dance, to the war, dance to the war.
At age 8, I had a vision of bringing peace to the Middle East on the football field of Friendswood, Texas, of all places. I didn't even know where the Middle East was. I never told anybody about this, and then later at age 29, I had a spiritual meltdown where I lost everything in a 24-hour period of time. And I began to ask very deep questions about the meaning of life, why I was here, what my purpose was, and what I could potentially do to make a difference, because I was clearly convinced.
We have peace.
Don't let them tear you down. You gotta stand back up. Don't let them win this war. You got it now. You got to fight. Fight. Fight.
Real pleasure to talk about using positive narrative to create change in the world, and so I'm really thrilled to be a part of the Zeitgeist community. Thank you.
Get the hell out of me. Take my heart and give me the peace that I need. Help us, oh please. Hear us knock, open up, let's talk. Every block is getting third world, surface of the sun hot. Like it's always been, but now it's not just ghettos. Whole world's in a recession. Well, what
I just want to give thanks to the Zeitgeist family. Y'all making some amazing music, films, activism happen across the world.
Yeah.
And we're so grateful to be a part of that today. Don't y'all agree?
We are evolving beyond our differences. We're problem solving like cosmic citizens. We know that war starts inside our own hearts. So here we end it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the August 15th, 2012 TZM Global Radio broadcast. My name is Peter Joseph. The opening segment was from the 2012 Los Angeles Zeitgeist Media Festival with various individuals and groups like Lillian's Rose, Ash Ruiz, Tim Krieg, and many others. It was an amazing event. It was well received. I have an interview later today with Hollywood Today to discuss more about why we did it, the purpose of it, its relationship to the movement, and everything else. And just to reiterate its point for those that maybe are new, you know, we can talk about things intellectually all day long, but you have to get people to feel it. We are creatures of comfort. We are creatures of aesthetic and emotion. It is not it's not a negative thing. It's not a positive thing. It's just who we are. The intellectual barriers that we put up as time moves forward, especially as we get older, become stronger and stronger. And the only way to break through that is not through intellectual realization, but through aesthetic realization. And I really believe that, and I think that a great majority of the civil rights issue type things that have happened in the world have happened because people have an empathetic response, empathic response. They are beginning to really feel it rather than just fall back on the intellectual, discourse of it all, which really doesn't have as much of an effect. I've used a number of examples in prior broadcasts on this issue. For example, you could have watched the Iraq War on television, looked at it like a video game, and sat there with your popcorn and experienced it in that realm, or you could have been there and you could have watched somebody get blown up in front of you And I can assure you, your aesthetic feeling would be a lot different. So, actually, I'll give one more example that just occurred to me. Racism. I think it's pretty well established and well known in the public that racism is a fallacy, meaning that the pigmentations of skin, the cultural change through time that has happened with different pockets of humans to give this illusion that we are insects, if you will, because of our appearance or because of our behavior. That, of course, is thrown right out the window with the basic fundamental understanding, recognition of history, that these changes are occurring because of different environments that the human being was culminated into. Different places of Earth generated different responses to the human organism. We are responsive. We are entirely evolving on all levels, and our environment basically depicts everything from the short-term cultural evolution to long-term multi-generational biological evolution. I'm not going to go on that tangent because I've said it numerous times before. But while we have that intellectual recognition, yes, that we are all the same, it's very obvious that the racial differences are just that, temporal and arbitrary. The ignorance of our upbringing, unfortunately, has created traditions and mental frameworks that have not supported that. So you can say 1 + 1 = 2, but if someone's deeply conditioned aesthetically to believe 1 + 1 = 3, or that 1 + 1 has no relevance, you have something to deal with there. And I think the aesthetic approach has its place, and it's much stronger than a lot of people realize. I don't want to belabor it. The point being is that we have to operate on multiple levels at all time to affect everyone in different positions of education and aesthetic and their values in order to change the world. And I hope that's obvious enough. And I just realized it's probably worth pointing out that the civil rights amendments that we had throughout time across the world, women's suffrage, there's a whole pattern that's emerged through time that says we're becoming more equal. And the next stage of this whole civil rights movement, which is really at the core of the Zeitgeist Movement, the application of modern science to technology is being hindered by our culture, not allowing the fruits of abundance, post-scarcity to come forward. And that is a civil rights issue. That really is a civil rights issue. And the next level of that, my point being, is class. Not to say that's the end either, but the class relationship is next to go. It's a natural course of human evolution to see this happen, and our very stability as a species is dependent upon this type of equalization occurring and mutual respect. Albert Einstein said he had no idea what World War III would be fought with, but he knows that World War IV would be fought with sticks and stones. The dangers of the types of divisions that have generated through sovereignty, through what exists still with racial issues, with gender issues, and not to mention class issues, these are what will destroy humanity at its core kernel seed. These are the core psychological attributes that undermine the stability of our society and essentially affect our evolutionary fitness, if I could be so bold to use that term. So, that all stated, the 2012 Zeitgeist Media Festival Global with about 20 events, sympathetic. We raised about 700 pounds of food in Los Angeles alone. I'm still getting the feedback from all the other events to see how they did with their food drives, not to mention their attendance and everything else. But you're going to see an influx of uploads very soon. We had an enormous amount of footage from the event in Los Angeles, and I know others that I've been talking to have a great deal of footage they're working to get out there as well. And again, it's very important. It's one side of this coin that we're working with as a movement to affect people on multiple levels. On the other side, for example, that I'd like to mention is the Global Redesign Institute, something I've brought up in passing a number of times. It will probably be the flagship project of the Zeitgeist Movement as it unfolds. We have our cultural work, we have our general event days, we have all the things that we've been doing to educate. And by the way, I can't reiterate that enough, we are an educational movement. Everyone that's out there that wants to build something or get off the grid, those are all wonderful ideas, but at the core of this is a psychological transition. It's a revolution of values, and all of the minor little things we're trying to do, mostly selfishly, to get ourselves out of this system will have a very short-term effect. The goal is education, value shift. That's how you change the world. But the Global Redesign Institute will serve as a way to communicate technical possibility to the public through a virtual online platform initially, and then eventually larger scale conferences, very typical of our Z-Day events. They could actually be built into our Z-Day events. Speaking of which, there's discussion to have the main Z-Day event in Los Angeles this year because of the very, very healthy community we have here and the growing exposure we have with Western media in this region as well. In the event that does happen, I know personally I'm going to try and develop something with respect to the Global Redesign Institute to put on display, at least in concept, for digestion at the main Z-Day event. And we can talk about this more in our international meetings. If anyone listening is a coordinator of the Zeitgeist Movement, we can get development going. But I will say, as a final point, there have been so many projects that have been happening simultaneously. The One Planet project that was inspired by the Vancouver chapter has been doing a great deal of work as well. If you're not familiar with that, please go to the main site and you can find a link to that. And just overall, there's no shortage of projects, both individual or group identified, out there for the Zeitgeist Movement. And I want to make a point, actually, that I think is very important, and that has to do with where you find your place in trying to change the world. You find your place in activism. And it's funny to me, I remember this comment by Rutger Hauer at the Media Festival that he says, they came up with a word for us, activists, as though we're an anomaly. Is it me, or doesn't every person on this planet have an obligation to affect things, to move things forward, to inspire change, since that is the nature of our emergent kind of reality? It shouldn't be an anomaly for people to want to improve things. Just as an inventor serves to want to reinvent and create something with higher efficiency, why isn't that being applied to the entire social system without controversy, of course? The controversial notion that you must be a radical to want to change society and therefore you must be dangerous or an upstart, and all of the stigma attached has to go. And it really bothers me, in fact, that we have to even use terms like activist and the like. My great revelation personally is that this is what we are. This is what we do. We want change, improvement. We want to keep things moving and evolving. That is the life condition. That is the purpose. The only reason that people don't find those motivations is because they've been bankrupt. They've been robbed through their cultural conditioning to be fearful of opposing the current establishment. And that completely runs against the current of everything that we've learned through history with respect to how society has improved itself and how humanity has persevered. Now, for the remainder of this broadcast, I'm going to read some essays, paraphrased, in fact, that have to do with certain broad, overarching issues related to the Zeitgeist Movement. These are essays that are being groomed to be in the introduction of the coming 2012 orientation guide, which will serve as a book of sorts, as mentioned before, called Understanding a New Train of Thought. And ultimately, I think it's going to be a lot more effective in the way that the format of these essays are written, how they come together in the form of an orientation. They can be taken in segments. They can be expanded upon by individuals on their own accord. It's sort of a living document, if you will. So the first one I'd like to read is called Sourcing Solutions. And there's a quote by Albert Einstein that I always liked. It said, "The world we have created today as a result of our thinking thus far has problems which cannot be solved by thinking the way we thought when we created them." And that's a very, very, very smart point. It's a system reference, if you think about it. A central consideration inherent to the Zeitgeist Movement perspective on societal change for the better regards understanding progress itself. And there appears to be two basic angles to consider when it comes to personal or social progress. We have manifesting potential, and we have problem resolution. And I'm going to go through these points in detail. Manifesting potential is simply the improvement of a condition which was not considered prior to being in a problematic state. Example would be the ability to improve human athletic performance in a particular field through targeted strengthening, diet, and refining techniques which simply were not known before. Problem resolution, on the other hand, is simply the overcoming of an issue that has currently recognized detrimental consequences and or limitations to a given condition. A general example would be the discovery of a medical cure for an existing debilitating disease, so that disease poses no more harm. However, taken in the broad view, there's a distinct overlap between these two notions of manifesting potential and problem resolution, when the nature of knowledge development is taken into account. For example, an improvement to a given condition, a practice that then becomes normalized and common in the culture, can also potentially be part of a problem which requires resolution in the event new information as to its inefficiency is found or new advancements make it obsolete by comparison. For example, human air transportation, which is fairly new in society, with expanded transport efficiency greatly upon its application based on what we had prior. However, at what point will modern air transport be seen as a problem due to its inherent inefficiency by comparison to another new method? So efficiency is relative in this sense, as only when there is an expansion of knowledge and hence awareness that what was once considered the best approach becomes inferior. This seemingly abstract point is brought up to communicate the simple fact that every single practice we consider normal today has built into it an inevitable inefficiency which, upon new developments in science and technology, will likely produce a, open quote, problem at some point in the future when compared to newer emerging potentials. This is the nature of change, and if the scientific patterns of history reflect anything, it is that knowledge and its applications continue to evolve, improve, generally speaking. So, we go back to this seemingly separate issue of manifesting potential versus problem resolution, and it can hence be deduced that all problem resolutions are acts of manifesting potential and vice versa. I hope that's clear. And this also means that the actual tools used by society for a given purpose are always transient. Always. Technology, transient. Whether it's in the medium of transportation, medical practices, energy production, our social system, overarching philosophical application, etc. These practices are all manifest resolutions with respect to human necessity and efficiency, based upon the transient state of understanding we have or had at the time of their creation or evolution. So, this brings us to the point of purpose and cause. Root purpose and root cause. So when it comes to thinking about any act of invention or problem solving, we must get as close to the root purpose or the root cause, whether you're dealing with the manifest of potential, meaning the need to understand purpose to create that, or the root cause when trying to address a problem. We have to get as close to that as possible to make the most accurate assessment for action. Just as tools and techniques for potential are only as viable as the understanding of their foundational purpose, actions towards problem resolution are only as good as the understanding of the root cause. So this might seem obvious, but this concept is really devoid in many areas of thought in the world, especially when it comes to society. Rather than pursuing such a focus, most decisions today are based around customs, traditions that have inherent limits. The most obvious example, as an aside, is the use of money and investment and the inherent structured dynamics and psychology associated with that method. Another simple social example of this is the current method of human incarceration, which I'm sure we've all talked about at length, for so-called criminal behavior. For many, the solution to offensive forms of human behavior is to simply remove the individual from society and punish them. And this is based on a series of assumptions that stretch back millennia. Yet, the science behind human behavior has changed tremendously over time with respect to understanding causality. It is now common knowledge in the social sciences that most acts of crime would likely not occur if certain basic supportive environmental conditions were set for the human being. Putting people in prisons is not actually resolving anything with respect to the causal problems. It is just a patch, if you will, and will only temporarily stifle some effects of the larger problem. Another example, while seemingly different than the prior but equally as technical, is the manner by which most think about solutions to common domestic problems, such as traffic accidents. What is the solution to a situation where a driver makes a mistake and haphazardly changes lanes only to impact the vehicle next to it, causing an accident? Should there be a huge wall between them? What about more police? Should the person simply have his or her driver's license revoked since they are incompetent, apparently, and they just can't drive again? It is here where the notion of root cause, given that this is a problem, is often lost in the narrow frames of reference commonly understood by culture as solutions. The root cause of the accident can only partially be the question of integrity of the driver, with the more important issue the lack of integrity of the technology and infrastructure being used. Why? Because human fallibility is historically acknowledged and immutable. So just as early vehicles did not have, say, driver or passenger side airbags that are common today, which now reduced a large amount of injuries that existed in the past, the exact same logic should be applied to the system of vehicle interaction itself, taking into account preemptively new technical possibilities for increased safety to compensate for inevitable human error. So just as the airbag was developed years ago as the evolution of knowledge unfolded, today there is technology that enables automated driverless vehicles, which can not only detect every necessary element of the street needed to operate with accuracy, the vehicles themselves can detect each other, making collision almost impossible. This is the current state of such a solution when we consider the root cause and root purpose overall. Yet, as dramatically advanced as that solution may seem, given the roughly 1.2 million people who unnecessarily die in automobile accidents every year, this thought exercise still may be incomplete if you continue to extend the context with respect to the goal of societal safety. Perhaps there are other inefficiencies which relate to the transportation infrastructure and beyond that need to be symbiotically taken into account and overcome. Perhaps, for example, the use of individual automobiles, regardless of their safety inherently, have other problems which can only be logically resolved by the removal of the automobile application itself. Perhaps in a city with an expanding mobile population, such independent vehicle transport becomes unnecessarily cumbersome, slow, wasteful, dangerous, and inefficient. The more viable solution in this circumstance might become the need for a unified, integrated mass transit system that can increase speed, reduce energy use, reduce resource use, pollution, and many other related issues to the effect that using automobiles alone in such a condition then becomes part of the emerging problem. If the goal of a society is to do the correct and hence sustainable thing, reducing threats to humans and the habitat, increasing efficiency, a dynamic, self-generating logic unfolds with respect to our technological possibility and design approaches. That is the main point. Of course, the application of this type of problem solving is far from limited to such physical examples like an automobile, infrastructure, and the like. Is politics the answer to our social woes? Does it address root causes by its very design? Is money in the market system the most optimized method for securing progress and problem resolution and the manifesting of potential, increasing our potential? What does our modern state of science and technology have to contribute both in the realm of understanding causes and purposes on the social level? As will be denoted later in other essays, these understandings create a natural, clear train of thought with respect to how much better our world can be if we simply follow the logic created via the scientific method of thought to fulfill our goals of human sustainability and protection. The 1 billion people starving on this planet are not doing so because of some immutable natural consequence of our physical reality. There is plenty of food to go around. It is the social system which has its own outdated, contrived logic that perpetuates this social atrocity, along with countless others. So it's important to point out that the Zeitgeist Movement is not concerned with promoting patches as its ultimate goal, which, sad to say, is what the vast majority of activist institutions on the planet are currently doing. We want to promote the largest order, highest efficiency set of solutions possible, available at a given time, aligned with natural processes to improve the lives of all, while securing the integrity of our habitat. We want everyone to understand this train of thought clearly and develop a value identification with it. That is the real revolution. There is no single solution, only the near-empirical natural law reasoning that arrives at solutions and purpose. So that concludes the current state of this essay that was entitled Sourcing Solutions. It's an introductory essay, by the way. And I know a lot of people out there have already heard this type of approach of reasoning before, but unfortunately it's really not thought about clearly. I mean, I wish society was really thinking about how they thought about things. I know it sounds paradoxical, but if people really thought about their process of thought, you would see things change much more rapidly. Sadly, people are locked into a grid. Self-referential mind lock, as we've stated before. So I apologize for the short broadcast. I'm going to have to end now. I'm going to conclude with a song by Lillian's Rose called The Meantime. You know, we had a lot of great acts at the 2012 event, many that were very well known across the world, like Susan Dahim and Lily Hayden and Beth Chapman and a bunch of others. But Lillian's Rose is a new one from Los Angeles, and I was very impressed with it. So enjoy The Meantime, and I'll talk to all of you guys soon. Take care.
Caught on your strings, oh, you puppet master. Just what would happen if your toys really could do things? Your closet skeletons all came running after. You hold the power in the meantime, but much could happen in the meantime. You hold the power in the meantime, but much could happen in the meantime. A homeless phantom hides within a mansion's tomb. His empty solitude cause others teeth to chatter. Just like the butterfly frees itself from its cocoon. Oh, you will see soon, this ain't no laughing matter. You hold the power in the meantime, but much could happen in the meantime. You hold the power in the meantime, but much could happen in the meantime. And you're always running fast into the underground. In the end, all your walls will go crashing down. Some revere you for they fear you and your dirty deeds. Caught on your strings, oh, you puppet master. You hold the power in the meantime, but much could happen in the meantime. You hold the power in the meantime, but much could happen in the meantime. Just like the butterfly frees itself from its cocoon. Oh, you will see soon, this ain't no laughing matter. Thank you guys so much for having us. Thank you, Peter Joseph, and everybody involved. This is our last song.